Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, Lahir, or Alameen. How you doing today? This is Jibril Khalifa Al Sadat with Mark Hunter Brooks, and we come to you with another podcast about the importance of knowing yourself, right? The importance of knowing who you are. This is an important topic. This is a topic that I used to teach my students in my introduction to ethics class about who are you. This is to find out, to understand who you truly are, is the beginning of opening the doors to so many wonderful things. The first question I used to ask my students are, who are you? So some of them would give me, my name is John Smith, my name is Debbie Jones, my name is this and that's that. And I said, think about it. I said, that's not who you are. That's the name your parents gave to you. So then they start saying, well, I'm a student at this university and I'm a cook at this place and I'm a waitress here and I do this and I do that. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Is that who you are? Or is that something that you do? Yeah. So then I can see their faces getting all frustrated, right? And getting all pissed off. And they're like, well, what are you talking about? Who are you? I'm like, they tell me, I'm from North Carolina. I'm from this. I come from India. And I'm like, no, that's where you from. On my passport, it says American. But that's where I'm from. That's not who I am. Right? So after a while, they get all frustrated because they couldn't find the right answer. So they say, well, do you know who you are? And I said, yes, I do. And then they say, well, who are you then? And I tell them, frankly, I'm not going to tell you. And they were like, well, why? I said, because it took me years to find out who I am. And I'm 60-some years old. I'm like, you're 20-some years old. Take the time to find out who you are. Because it's through the journey that true knowledge comes. So that's why we have to find out, who are we? What are we? Because it says, know thyself. That's what it said on the Greek temple that came from Egypt. Know thyself. Shakespeare said, to thine own self be true. Mm-hmm. Why did they say these things? Because there's a deeper meaning to it. They're not talking about being self-aware, right? Self-awareness is one ability to accurately recognize one's own emotions, thoughts, and values. That's self-aware. You can be self-aware. You can sit down and you can meditate and you can become self-aware about how you're feeling about things, how you feel about things around you. What are your thoughts, how your thoughts are motivating you to do things. But to truly know yourself is introspection. Is to go inside yourself. Is to become self-discovering of your consciousness. It's examining your soul and your one true nature. That's what it means to know thyself. Who are you really? Right? Why are you on this planet? Why are you living this mortal finite life? They used to say, the saying always said, know thyself and you will know thy God. But you have to go through the self-discovery motion. You have to go through the introspection to know who your creator is. That's the only way to go. As Jesus said, only through me will you know the Father. Same thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. You make me think of my father, and my mother always used to say that she was envious or jealous of my father because whenever he put his head on the pillow at night, he went straight to sleep. And he didn't have any worries. He didn't have anything that he regretted having done. He just had a nice, honest life. And he lived honestly, he cared about other people, and that allowed him to sleep well at night. But I was saying that because he knew himself. He knew who he was. And for people who are in business or in politics or in these different situations with groups, you have to make decisions a lot of times. And you have people who have a lot of stress, about their lives, about decisions they've made in their lives, about decisions they've made, in their organizations. And it all comes down to who you are. What do you believe in, and who are you? And if you can know that, then you can make decisions based on who you are and what you believe. And whatever the outcome, whether you lose your job or whether there's some kind of punishment you may face, you'll be able to put your head on the pillow at night and go to sleep because you were confident in what you did, and it meshed with who you were and what you believed. And I think that's important because a lot of people, whether you want to say it's cowardice or an inability to stand up for some things that you believe in, it's because you don't know yourself. Ultimately, you don't know yourself or what you believe in. And I think that what you believe in depends on your sensitivity to the needs of others and the suffering of others, to an understanding of your friends, your family, and your community. But if you can do that, know who you are and know what you believe in, you'll be able to sleep well at night. And if you can't sleep well at night, consider that that may be one of the problems or one of the issues or concerns that you need to think about is who are you and what do you believe in? And then do you make decisions and do things that are consistent with that as well?
Yeah, because the road to self knowledge leads to a balance and a tranquility, an evenness of thought. Because, I used to, for a long time, I used to be angry and I didn't know why I was angry. I used to be mad and mean and just treating people badly because I was out of balance.
Mm.
Aristotle always talk about finding the golden mean through 2 points, right? The Zen masters talk about balance. The Tao master talk about balance. Why do everybody talk about balance? Because you need to have that evenness, that steadiness, you know, to not tip one way or tip the other, but to be able to take whatever goes on. That's why when things happen to me and they're good, I don't get too high. And when they're bad, I don't get too low. Because I know all things are one and all things are come from flow from the same thing. And that's what knowing yourself can happen, can do for you. And that's what knowing yourself can bring you. A lot of people are taking drugs now. A lot of people have a lot of anxiety. I was just reading today about how many people are committing suicide because of COVID-19. How many people can't stand being locked up, locked down in their house because of all the stress they're going through. I ask myself, what stress are you going through? But then I think about it and I realize it's just like someone in solitary confinement. When people have to be by themselves and have to listen to themselves and have to look inside at themselves, they get frightened because they don't like what they see or they see something they don't understand. And it can truly drive you mad. That's why we have in Sufism, we have a 40-day retreat
Mm.
where you don't talk to anybody, you sit in a room and you're in silence by yourself, almost like solitary confinement. And you sit there and you focus at the wall and you just think and you go into yourself and you face your fears. But you need a Sufi master with you because sometimes you can get lost within yourself and you can't find yourself back out and you need somebody to lead you back out. And that's the same thing what yogi masters do. It's almost like if you ever watched Star Wars and you've seen, I believe it was the second one, and you seen when Luke was being trained by Yoda, and Luke wanted to go in the cave, and Yoda told him, "Don't go in there yet." And, Luke said, well, why not? And Yoda said, because you're not ready. But Luke, being young, like we all were at one time, and Luke see, he seen his own face. Because that is who our biggest fear is. Our biggest fear is ourselves. Because we don't know who we are. And that fear lives on the side of us. And that fear has us doing irrational things. That's why it's important to know yourself. As I said, once again, it's more than self awareness, it is about introspection. Go ahead, Mark.
No, and you said a
Did you have
great
something to
thing
say?
earlier was about the golden mean. And once you know yourself and you know your strengths and your weaknesses, you can use that golden mean to help guide you in becoming a stronger and better person. Is because a lot of what that teaches you is how to get control of your emotions and get control of your ego, and that you're not, you know, a coward or someone who would sit there and be oppressive to someone. You're someone in the middle who's courageous. You know, you aren't a glutton, and you aren't, you know, I don't know what the opposite of that is. You know,
Something like that. Anorexic.
yeah, you're somewhere in the middle, and that's part of the process of living, is to be able to work toward that middle ground, so that you're not one way or the other, but you're somewhere in the middle. And that way you can identify with people who are on those extremes, but when you walk in the middle, you walk in a better part of life. And that goes for being able to control your emotions, being able to control your ego, how you interact with other people. It just promotes that strong foundation for yourself and building your community. And that's one of the things we wanted to talk about in the podcast. You know, how to create that strong foundation. And one of the ways is to use the golden mean to improve yourself. And you can look it up on the internet, and there's a lot that's been written, and it's actually embodied in a lot of different world religions and a lot of different philosophies. But it's a real important thing to know and understand. But that's part of knowing yourself too, is knowing what your weaknesses are and knowing where you need to work, and know what your strengths are and what you offer to other people and into the community, and how you can help other people. And helping others and being others focused is another part of living in a community. But you've got to know yourself and get rid of that selfish aspect of your life and become more helpful to other people as well. And I think that's part of one of the things you learn as you go through this golden mean and this process of evening yourself out from an emotional and egotistical standpoint.
And
And just as an aside, I was going to say your ego is not a bad thing. It's there actually to protect you. And I think people use the analogy of an eggshell for a chicken, for a baby chick that's about to hatch. The ego is there to protect that chick so that it can grow and develop. But at some point, you want to break out of that ego and become yourself. And what Jibril was saying at the start, you know, when he talked about his students and introduction to his philosophy classes, is asking them who they are. And it's not what you do, and it's not where you're from. It's who you are internally. And the way you get beyond your ego and your emotions is to go, you know, into yourself and to understand yourself and who you are. And I think that causes a lot of people problems in their middle age, especially, you know, people who were managers in companies or CEOs of corporations. You know, they've identified themselves with their position. And then, you know, when it's time for them to retire, they end up becoming a tyrant for those around them because they're used to managing and ordering around hundreds of people. And then all of a sudden it's just them and their spouse, you know, and it's like, woe unto them, you know, but it's hard to make those transitions when you don't know yourself, when you think you're somebody else.
yeah.
And it's very, very, very important, and all throughout your life, not just when you're older, but when you're younger too. And the younger you can figure out who you are, the more helpful you'll be to other people and the better contributor you'll be to society.
Yeah. Knowledge is the key to all things, right? Um, with me, to piggyback on what Mark was saying, I was either I was in the food service industry for 30 years, and I considered myself, when I first got into it, I considered myself a writer because I had written my first poetry book when I was 10 years old, before the change came. The way I would like to say, the darkness came. And I considered myself a writer. And then I was a cook who wrote. And that's how I considered myself. I was a cook who wrote. As because of need of materialism, need of money, taking care of wife and children, stuff like that, I ended up being a cook. Well, first I was a writer who cooked, and then all of a sudden I became a cook who wrote. So I had to change what I thought and who I thought I was. At first, I thought I was a writer, even though it was my occupation. I thought this is what I did. I mean, I would read, all the great, books and stuff like that. The playwrights, the poets, the writers, everything I did. I stayed in bookstores. I read all these books because I was a writer. I was going to be a writer, regardless. And this is who I was. And all I did, I figured, okay, I'm gonna write, but I cook just to make money. And once I sell my writing, hell away with cooking. As time got on and I didn't sell any writing, I became a cook who wrote. So I had to, instead of buying, all 14 and a half novels of Dickens, I'll buy 14 and a half cookbooks on, pastries, on French pastries. So I noticed not only was my library changing, but I was also changing too. And then one day I had a French chef come to me and he said, Gabrielle, which is French for Jibril, he said, the kitchen is a jealous mistress. He said, you're either going to have to choose between writing or cooking. He said, if you want to be good at this business, you won't be able to do both because cooking would take up all your life. I had to make a choice. So I chose to be a chef because I wanted to be good at what I've done. I've always been competitive. So whatever I'm doing, I want to be good at it, which competition is an ego-driven thing also. And it took me a long time to accept the title of chef. Even though I was chef, I was doing the job. People call me chef. I'll bristle and get mad and say, don't call me chef. Don't call me chef. Call me by my name. Don't call me chef. So I used to, after a couple of years of doing this, I used to come home and I used to complain to my wife. I was like, these people want to call me chef. I'm not a chef. I don't want to be called chef. I just want to call my name. She said, well, you are a chef. It's like, this is what you train for. This is what you do. This is what you get paid for. Let them call you chef. And I finally gave in and I said, okay, I'll be chef. And chef became what I thought who I was. Everybody asked me, who are you? I was like, I'm chef. Because that's all I knew. Everybody called me that. My ego glammed onto it, and it was interwoven together.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and a lot of people don't really figure out who they are until their 40s and 50s later on in life because they're so busy, building a career, building a family, and they have all these other things that want to take over their lives. When you were saying, the chef or the being, what is it when you're saying food is a jealous mistress or?
Yeah, food is a jealous mistress. It doesn't allow you time for anything else, really. Not if you want to not if you want to do it well.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with, it could be your family, is that if you want to do it well, you'll spend a lot of time with it. It could be your job, whatever it is, can consume you as well. And then you go through doing your job and building your family and all like that, and you don't really understand who you are. So if you can't do that as you're growing up or have some idea of that as you're growing up, you may not have the time to figure that out until you're much older. And I know that's something that's been more and more important as I've gotten older. And when I was young, I was very involved in organizations and stuff in junior high school, and going through school. I was in a number of different organizations, and then that kind of led into my jobs, when I got out in the working world, and I associated myself with that, but and this is kind of interesting. Is there was one time when I was a senior in school. I was talking to a guidance counselor, and he just said, you're really involved in a lot of different organizations. I said, yes, I am. And he said, well, how many friends do you have? He said, do you have a lot of friends or a lot of acquaintances? And that was the first time I'd ever thought about that. But because I was so involved in doing, student organizations and things like that, I had a lot of acquaintances. People knew who I was, and we had, kind of common conversations. But did anybody really know me? And it was no, they didn't, because they knew that persona of who I was, from an organizational standpoint, but they didn't know who I was as an individual. And I would even say, to some extent, I didn't know who I was as an individual because I was so busy doing school. I was so busy doing these organizations. I was so busy doing other things. And you don't really get a chance to know who you are. You don't get a chance to be alone with yourself. And that's what kind of leads to this understanding. And Jibril had made a point earlier too, about people in solitary confinement. There's a difference between isolation and solitude. And isolation could feel like a punishment to you. But if you're used to being with yourself and being by yourself, that solitude, that's actually something that can be pretty comfortable and enjoyable. So it depends on how you look at the situation you're in as to how it will affect you.
Yeah, because the thing that I had to learn on my road to redemption is that I had to strip myself of everything.
Mm,
Strip myself of name, strip myself of title, strip myself of occupation, strip myself of everything. The only thing that was left was the self. No husband, no father, no son, no chef, no cook, no student, no anything. I had to strip myself down to the bare essence, and I had to let my ego be a less of an identifier than it was before. Sufi Chef says about the ego, you either ride the mule or you carry the mule. And I decided to ride the mule since I was carrying it all my life. And carrying that mule all your life can be awful heavy.
mm,
The ego can drag you down, and the ego can have you doing all sorts of things. It is there for a reason, it's there for self-identification, but it's not truly who you are. You are not your ego. Your ego will try to convince you that's who you are, but you are not your ego.
yeah.
So you have to strip yourself of that stuff. You have to
So,
go ahead.
well, I'm sorry, Jabril, when you were talking about this 40-day exercise that you went through as part of the Sufi training, is that an effort to strip yourself or
Yeah,
to get you away from thinking of who you are, so that you could, or from a objective standpoint?
instead of outside in.
Yeah.
You have to find that center that's inside of you before you became matter. That piece of that soul that your ego tries to tell you don't exist and not really there. That tries to tell you all I am is matter. All I am is what you see in front of you. You know, all that we know, we just know through our senses.
Mm,
Anything else doesn't exist. That's what your ego constantly tells you. Your ego constantly tells you birth to death is all you have.
mm,
But your soul knows different. Your soul knows that you are an immortal being. Your soul knows that there is no birth and there is no death. There just is. There's no being and there's no becoming. There just is. And that's where you get your balance at. And that's where you get your understanding at. Because you know the only truth is the truth that has created all of this. The one truth, the one reality. Now, in Western philosophy, we teach metaphysics and we teach about identity, reality, and truth. And we have all these different theories. But there's only one truth and one reality that human beings have known since the beginning of millennia, since the beginning of time. It runs through all our religion. It runs through all our philosophies. And in a way, it runs through all our sciences also. Take quantum theory, for example. This is not new knowledge. It's just each generation puts a piece of the puzzle together. This human existence is like a big, 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. Every generation come along and put together like 10 pieces. And then the next generation put together 10 more and 10 more. And we still haven't finished the puzzle yet. And what our race against time is, are we going to be allowed to finish the puzzle so we can, as Mark always talks about, spiritually grow? Or all this experiment is going to end and we're going to go the way of the dinosaurs because we refuse to finish the puzzle. We refuse to see what we're put on this planet to see, in this mortal existence to see.
Wow. And we were talking about change when we were talking about politics in the previous podcast, is that part of putting those puzzle pieces together is helping us and helping other people to change. And in order to change, you have to know who you are. But change is a process, and you need mentors and you need leaders and you need people who have had experience to guide you through that. And I think and you bring up a great point, is humanity and people living on this planet, as a whole, they put so many pieces of the puzzle together. And in order to do that, you have to have a community that people have to know who they are and not what they do or where they're from, or, different ways of identifying with, external things. They need to know who they are from an internal perspective in order to be able to put those puzzle pieces together as selfless beings who are working with each other.
Separation is the thing that's hurting us more. Why do we constantly, as human beings, want to be separated? The way I know me is because I'm not you. That's the way we think. Instead of saying the way I know me is because I think that way. That's the point we have to get through. I cannot kill him because he is me and I am him. So that's like committing suicide. It makes no sense to me. You would think after all these millennia, consciously, we would have reached that point. Instead, it seems like we're regressing. As Pope Paul said in his last encyclical letter, it seems like we're regressing, like we're going backwards. At one time, at the beginning of last century, everybody said, okay, in the 19th century, everybody carried weapons. This is not a civilized society. You cannot have everybody walking around with weapons and shooting each other and stuff like that. A civilized society doesn't do that. Yeah. Well, guess what we're doing now? Well, we spent the 20th century taking guns off of people, and we spent 21st century putting guns back on people. Now, I'm myself a Second Amendment guy. I have nothing against the Second Amendment. But what I'm saying is, civilizational-wise, does that make any sense? We spent a century unarming the populace because we said we have a police force. We are not barbarians. We're not going to walk around just shooting each other and killing each other like some animals on the street. We are a civilized nation. Well, how civilized are we now where we have all these people carrying weapons once again? Are we going back to the Wild Wild West? Are we regressing? We need to ask ourselves this, people. What is this thing about, I don't want anybody taking guns, but I don't want anybody coming to my house taking my guns away either. But why do we have this need that we need to arm ourselves? What are we afraid of?
Mm-hmm.
Is it truly the government we're afraid of? Because the government is us. Or truly we're afraid of each other?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to ask the second question. Why are we afraid of each other?
That's probably a good point to end on.
Oh, we went on. Okay, then. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. So this is just stay in touch, folks, for the next podcast, and we'll continue the conversation. That it's Jibril and Mark, and hope you have a good day, and we'll be back in touch soon. Take care.
Peace. Assalamu alaikum.